Okay, so just showing y'all, this morning posted our slides that we're going to be going over. We have our Cornell notes for 8.1. They are due on Thursday, February 4th. Right. Then we have our Cornell notes for 8.2 as well. Those are not due until Sunday at 11:59, so that they'll be here, so that you'll have them for our quiz on Monday, right? Okay. Your tests, chapter 6 tests, have been graded and put into RenWeb. As soon as I get everybody's chapter 6 test, I'll release it, so you can go back and look at it. But there are 2 tests that I'm still missing, and so as soon as those get complete, they'll be graded and you'll see how you did. Okay. So we're skipping chapter 7, which we left off in the middle of what war?
American Revolution.
American Revolution, right? And let me get this going. Long story short, we win, right? Surprise. No one in here is speaking with a British accent or a Canadian accent.
How did we get like an American accent?
So accents change over time. And depending on who you're around, like the way you speak will influence the way everyone in this room speaks.
I know, but like once they were all from Britain, so how
They were, but as people from other parts of the world started coming here and started congregating in certain areas, they started changing and adjusting their accents. Not intentionally, it just happens. That's why people in Boston, Mikey. Okay, that's why people in Boston have a very like kind of stereotypical Boston act, like a noticeable accent. That's mainly because a lot of Irish ended up immigrating into Boston. Yeah, and so they share some of that. Okay. And the South, the same thing, right? People in the South have a very distinctive accent. And if you go into rural Texas, Michaela, do people in rural Texas have a distinctive accent?
Yes.
Very much so.
Mm-hmm.
Very much so. All right. I'm actually going to put y'all speakers. There we go. Okay, Michaela, try to speak again. I just want to see if I got this.
Hello.
All right, you're over the loud speaker now.
Oh.
Okay. Hopefully we won't have an issue like that y'all told me about before we started recording. Okay. About outside noises coming in. Okay. So chapter 7 is all about us winning, fighting the main battles of the American Revolution, and we ultimately win. And anybody know what treaty we signed with Great Britain to get them to recognize us as an independent nation? Well, no, nope. We've actually, this is the second time we've heard the first part of this treaty.
Olive branch.
Nope.
I have no idea.
It's of another city, the treaty of something, another city in Europe.
Paris.
What's, huh?
Paris.
Paris.
What?
Yeah, it's the second time we've heard a Treaty of Paris. And this one is, so the first one, Treaty of Paris of 1763, that ended what war?
French and Indian.
French and Indian War. This one is the Treaty of Paris of 1783. So it's 20 years, it's 20 years after the French and Indian War. All right, we have another Treaty of Paris. And so The thing now that we're up to, now that we're our independent nation, is we have to figure out how in the world are we going to govern ourselves. All right. That was kind of what we fought the entire war for to begin with, right? They were taxing us without giving us the ability to represent ourselves in parliament. Now that we have our country, we get to choose how we want to carry it out. Okay. So the first thing that we come up with is the Articles of Confederation. Okay. What is like nowadays when we hear Confederation, we think of the South and the Confederate States. Okay. But that word has kind of been co-opted by the South in their attempt to break away. What does the word confederation mean outside of that context?
I have no
When we talked about earlier, we talked about the Iroquois Confederation, like several chapters ago. What was that?
Like where the government and the people have, or the government has a bit more power?
No, I think you're
People have the
thinking
power.
federation.
The
Okay.
people have the power.
Well, in a confederation, it's like you have different governments that are loosely connected. Okay.
Oh.
The Iroquois Confederation was about different Iroquois tribes that operated somewhat together. Okay. So it's this loose band of groups. Okay. So with the Articles of Confederation, do you think that we viewed ourselves as one single country or 13 separate countries allied together? 13 separate. That's the way we viewed ourselves. 13 separate countries that were allies with one another. Remember that the word state outside of the United States, the word state is synonymous, is the same thing as what other word? Country, right? Outside of the United States, the word state is the same thing as country. So when we talked about the state of Virginia, they were referencing essentially the country of Virginia, right? So with the Articles of Confederation, it was loosely bound. All these countries thought of themselves independently to some degree, okay? So the Treaty of Paris of 1783. So we're going to kind of backtrack a little bit because you can see we don't become an independent nation until 1783. And so here we are, 1776. All right. So one of the things that we had to do was we had to bound together and we had to figure out a way to stay together because even though Great Britain lost the war, do you think they want the American colonies back? I mean, do we have resources that they want access to?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, they would like to have us back, right? So we had to figure out a way to stick together. In May of 1776, the Continental Congress instructed the states to start organizing their own state constitutions.
Does that mean one of them could introduce dictatorship?
Sure, that would have been a possibility, right? Each state controlled, and even today, do states have a lot of autonomy on the laws of that state? Yes. Yeah, they do, right? In Texas, one of the things that we're pretty liberal on is gun laws. Do we have a lot of restrictions on guns? No. No, we don't. So like, and I use that word liberal not in terms of political leanings, but if I were to give you the instructions, like we're cooking something and I say, apply the salt liberally. Does that mean to apply a little bit of salt or a lot of salt? Huh? A lot. So in terms of gun laws, like, are we very, very much pro-gun? Yeah, we apply guns liberally in Texas, like lots of guns. Okay. So, but yeah, each state is different, right? California is on the other side of that issue, right? Okay. So Congress began organizing, asking the states to organize their own governments and draft their own constitutions. You know, by the, I think that was by the end of 1776, we had 8 of the 13 go ahead and do that. Okay, again, are they viewing themselves as independent countries or one country together? Independent countries. Okay. One of the common, and then I have other dates here, but that's not as important. One of the common themes among all of these constitutions that the states will write for themselves. Now, Mikey, you said, could one of them chosen to be a dictator? Yeah, they could have. They could have chosen themselves a monarchy and things like that, but they all decided to limit the power of the governor.
Because they didn't want.
I mean, it's unrealistic.
Wait,
that
wait,
they
wait.
would work with something
Tara.
like that.
Because they obviously didn't like how when they were under British rule, they didn't like it. So
Uh-huh.
they definitely were determined to not have the same government and stuff as the British. So they limited their power because Britain had like basically all the power. The Parliament had a bunch of power,
Uh-huh.
and they didn't have a lot of power. So they wanted to make sure that the government didn't have a lot of power.
Right. Well, more specifically, it's talking about the power of the governor. How is the governor similar to the king? How could a governor be similar to a king?
He has temptations.
Okay, well, there's temptation, but think of the structure of the government.
He has a
Commander-in-chief.
He is the lone main power in that part of the government.
Do they both tend to be at the top of the government?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Like we talk about the governor of Texas. Anyone know who the governor of Texas is? What's his first name? Okay, it's Greg Abbott. Okay, Greg Abbott. We pay a lot of attention I don't know how often he runs for. I think we don't hold governor elections like on a 4-year or 8 or 2-year. I think it's something odd. I could be wrong on that. I don't know when he comes up for re-election again. But when we do have the governor's race election, we hear a lot of news about that. But do we hear a lot of news about our state representatives? No, not so much. Like I know who my governor is, and I know who my state representative is. Do I know off the top of my hand who my state senator is? I'd have to look that up, to be honest. All right. So we pay a lot more attention but the governorships tend to be at the top of the government. We all know who they are. And so if they did not limit the power of the governor, they were concerned about it becoming a dictatorship, right? Like what they were pushing off. Okay. So the new national government was going to be a representative republic or a constitutional republic, but there's still a lot of disagreement about kind of how to structure this. Most Americans wanted a central government that was really, really weak. Really
But
weak.
not too weak.
Nope,
So they
nope.
could defend.
Really,
They
really
literally
weak.
wanted a weak.
Why did they
So
want a
it's easy to
central?
overthrow.
Why did they want a central government that was really weak?
So that the people would have a lot of power.
Well, so where would the power belong?
Us.
Which government?
What's
The
name?
central government or the state government?
The state government.
The state governments. Okay. They wanted the central government to be really tiny, so that the state governments held the power and they can do whatever they wanted without the federal government, without the central government telling them otherwise.
The hard thing is that meant that if you wanted a law passed, every single state It had to be unanimous.
Yeah, and that we'll get to that part, right? Because we haven't created the Articles of Confederation yet. Okay. And so the original belief in terms of responsibility for the federal government, for the central government, is that they should only be really in charge of two things: waging war and foreign affairs.
Yep.
Right? Because foreign affairs, they can speak for on behalf of all of the states. And waging war, hey, it worked for us for the American Revolution, so why not do it again? All right. But everything else, if it wasn't waging war or foreign relations,
It was all for the state.
all to the states. Okay? Do we still have this discussion today about how much power should be given to the states versus the
Yes.
federal government? Yeah. Yeah. All right. So 1777, the Continental Congress, Second Continental Congress goes ahead and adopts the Articles of Confederation to be our first constitution. Have we won the war yet?
No, this is right after we write the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, you know, that's about a year and a half after the Declaration of Independence. We have not won the war yet, but we're getting ready to govern ourselves if and when we do win, because at this point they did not know for sure that they were going to win. Okay. So the Articles of Confederation had a very weak central government. You know, it was kind of more of a,
But that was like,
it was extremely by choice. As we've already said, the people were belonged to their states first and Americans second. They didn't really consider themselves American first. It would be like saying, I'm Texan first, American second, right?
like, say
It's
somebody,
not really good.
if somebody asked you who you were, like today, you'd be like, I'm American.
I'm American, yeah. If you were traveling abroad and someone asked you, hey, where are you from? I'm from the States. Right. That's how people outside of the United States refer to the United States. They just call us the States. Okay. Now, if we're Texan, we have a little bit more pride than other states,
Yeah.
right?
A lot more.
Yeah, a tiny bit more. But if we're from a
Maryland.
state like, well, I was going to say Wyoming,
Oh.
right? Not as much pride as the state of Texas. Okay. Congressional powers. Okay, so under the Articles of Confederation, some things that Congress could do, they can conduct foreign affairs. That makes sense, right? Maintain armed forces. Does that fit into the two things that we think government or the federal government should do at this point?
Yes.
Yeah, wage war and foreign affairs. Okay. They could borrow money. Okay, you may have to borrow money in order to wage war.
But the only thing is this.
We'll get there. We'll get there. And they could print money. Just print it off. Right? But the things that they could not do, they could not regulate trade between the states. Okay, that's a problem because what if one state wants to put a tax on goods coming in from another state? Could that be a problem?
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be, right? They couldn't institute a draft. Okay, so they had to ask for volunteers. Like they could wage war, but you have to ask for volunteers. They could not institute a draft. And they could not impose taxes. Okay, so real quick, kind of a sidebar. Anybody know when the last time was that we had a draft?
The
Vietnam War.
Oh,
Okay, we fought other wars, but we have not had a draft ever since Vietnam. Our armed forces have been volunteer only. And yeah, okay. But does this sound fiscally responsible? Fiscally is financial. Like we're allowing the federal government to wage war. They can borrow money and they can print money, but they can't raise taxes.
I guess that's fair.
Okay,
Not really, no.
does waging war cost money?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so that's an expense. That's
It's
spending
not.
money.
I change my mind. It's not.
Okay. Can borrow, so right, but where's the income coming from? But if they can't raise taxes, where's the income coming from?
Nowhere.
Right? You see the problem? Right? We're saying, hey, David, you can go out and spend as much money as you want, but you can't earn money. That's an issue, right? In fact, the way that the Congress under the Articles of Confederation could earn money is they had to ask the states to give them money.
Bruh.
Do you think any state is going to give money to the federal government if the other states don't have to?
Yeah, if you don't have to, what's the point?
Right? Yeah, so we can already see, there are flaws in this system. Okay. There was no chief executive, no president, okay, because again, they did not want what? A dictator. They didn't want to create, like we were kind of reacting from our experience with King George, okay? They had to carry out their business through congressional committees. That's like a group essentially decided what the government's business was, which is fine for a lot of things. But if you need to make a decision quickly, is discussing it in committee the best way to make it quickly? How many of y'all have family discussions about where to go to eat or where to get food? Is it faster if someone just says, we're going to do this? Or, hey, let's talk about it?
It's faster if you say we're doing this.
Yeah. If you wait to talk about it, it takes you just get hungry, right? And then everybody gets hangry because they're hungry and angry from it. All right. So not every state supported the articles because under each plan or under the plan, each state only had one vote. They all had the same number of votes. Okay. So who benefited from that? Like which states benefited? Underpopulated, the lower populated states benefited, right? If you have Rhode Island, who has, let's just say 10,000 people, and New York, which has 100,000 people, how many votes does New York get? Nope, they get one vote. How many votes does Rhode Island get with 1/10 of the population of New York? One vote. So who is better represented in Congress? People from Rhode Island or people from New York? People from Rhode Island. Because each time they vote, they're casting one of 10,000 votes. Okay. Each time someone votes in New York, it's one of 100,000. So just think of fractions, right? The numerator being 1 and the denominator being the population. The larger your population, the less you're represented. The smaller your population, the more you're represented, right? So each state having one vote, who does that benefit? Large states or small states? Small states, okay? And then before the articles could take effect, they needed to be ratified by how many of the states, Tara? All of them. Every state had to agree. When was the last time we've had every state in agreement? Like 9/11, like after 9/11, right? Going to war against the Taliban. That was a pretty much unanimous decision. But it doesn't happen very often, okay? So Congress couldn't pass a law unless 13 states voted in favor of it. Okay. Today, sorry, not 13 states here. What was I thinking here? 9 states. I'll come back.
9 states, yeah.
9 states. 2/3 support versus how much does it take to pass a law now? What percentage of Congress?
51?
51%.
Yay.
Yeah. Okay, so some of the weaknesses here: no authority to raise money through taxes. We could spend as much as we wanted, and we could borrow as much, but we couldn't tax. So how do you think we're going to get the money? What do you think we're going to do? Can't tax.
Borrow.
We could borrow, but we have to pay back. What are we going to do? How are we going to pay that back?
Still.
Nope. There's one other power that Congress has.
Print.
Print the money.
But
We're
then
gonna,
the
y'all
money
can't
isn't
see what
really
I'm
as good.
pointing at the printer. Okay. We're gonna print the money. This is gonna be a problem. Okay. Other weaknesses, no control over foreign trade. So if one state wanted to trade with France, another state wanted to trade with Great Britain, I mean, we couldn't have uniform instance of trade there. States were not required to follow federal law. So if the federal government passed a law, a state could just say, no, I don't like it. Yeah. So what does that do to the power of the central government? Does that make any vote that they cast meaningless?
Through the floor.
Yeah, it kind of does. It's like, what's the point? Okay. And then if there was, this is what I was thinking earlier. If they were going to amend the articles, it would take all 13 states to amend. Okay. Anybody know how many states it takes now?
15,
Nope.
17.
No. Nope.
25,
Okay.
26.
So to propose an amendment to the Constitution, it just takes 2/3 of the state to propose, to suggest an amendment.
So 30.
Okay. That was like 67% of the states. To pass, to adopt an amendment, to ratify it, now it's 75%. Okay. But that's a lot better than 100%.
35.
About, yeah, around there. Okay. So notable achievements. Yeah, they signed a treaty with Great Britain. Of course they did. It was the Treaty of Paris of 1763. And they did help set up and govern Western lands. So they did that too. Okay. Some policies. Okay, this was another way. So I guess there was one other way for the Articles of Confederation to earn money for the federal government, and that was the sale of Western lands. They could earn money by selling Western lands that were not part of any state. They could sell that off. Okay. Is that a sustainable model for bringing income into your government? By selling land?
No, because then.
Eventually, what's going to happen?
You're gonna run out of land.
And you'll make more
Well,
money off the land than you
but-
did selling it.
But eventually you're going to run out of land, right? And so you're not going to. So the articles though did not, one of the faults, they didn't have a process for which the new land could come and become a state. That will take a state law, or sorry, a federal law. But what land did we get as a result of the Treaty of Paris?
All the land west of the Appalachian.
To what river?
Mississippi.
Mississippi. So everything from the treaty, from the Appalachian Mountains to the
That is
treaty.
not a lot.
Well, it doubled the size of the colonies,
Okay, yeah, but that's still not a lot.
but it doubled the size of colonies. I mean, so
The colonies were not a lot back then.
it doubled it. It's right. Okay. So let's see. We are almost done. Yes. Huh. I thought I deleted that slide. Okay. That's odd.
Look at this.
Okay, Mikey. Okay. Yeah, I don't know why. I guess it didn't save. So the ordinance of 1785, Congress passes ordinance to sell lands to earn money. I went through and deleted this stuff because I was like, y'all can, we don't have to go through that stuff. But if there was essentially no law set up for these Western lands, does that cause a problem?
Mm,
You sell the land, but someone else comes up and says, "Hey, no, I bought this land." Is that a problem?
mm,
Yeah, yeah. And then other people would say, "Well, I bought," whether they did or not, they'll claim that they bought a large part of land. All of this is a problem. And one of John Locke's principles that influenced Thomas Jefferson was the right to life, liberty, and
land.
Property.
right? Property's pretty big for the United States. Personal property, ownership. And so Richard Henry Lee ends up petitioning Congress to say, "Hey, we got to fix something over here in the Western lands. It's cray cray over there. No one's respecting anybody's property rights. Like it's insane." Okay, Mikey, please stop with the bottle. Okay, so Congress gets together, and you can see it's 1787, 1785. We're on our own now. They passed the Northwest Ordinance to protect property rights. Okay. What territory is included in the Northwest Territory? Think back to the French and Indian War. What did we fight over? Nope, not Louisiana.
Ohio River Valley.
Ohio River Valley, the Ohio River. Okay. It was over there. I went through and deleted these points as well. Essentially, to summarize, when you got enough people moving into a territory, they could apply to become a state. And whose approval did they have to get? Congress. Why does Congress have to approve whether a territory can become a state?
So they can agree with less power going away.
No.
Power going away, basically.
Power's not really going away, but
It's more power created.
no, more power's not being created. A territory is gaining the rights that come with being a state.
But according
What?
to the Article of Federation, they still have the same power as every other state.
Yes, but power, like just because a territory gains power, that doesn't necessarily mean that others are losing. Okay, but what rights are coming with becoming a state? What do the states have that territories do not?
Give me it.
Representation.
There's
Where?
representation
Where?
in Congress.
Yes, representation in Congress. Okay. Territories do not have representation in Congress. States do. So that's one of the reasons that the Congress has to approve these territories. Okay. Yeah, and I deleted this slide too. Y'all can read about that. We're not going to deleted this slide. I combined. I don't know why it's. I guess it just didn't save. That's sad. Okay. So 1800, Congress passes the Land Act. Now this slide is kind of a little bit out of place because by the year 1800, we are no longer under the Articles of Confederation. All right. And so essentially all that the Land Act of 1800 did was it allowed people to finance the purchase of land. Okay. But we're going to skip that. Any questions about the Land Act, I'm not going to focus on. Okay, so here we are. Now the chickens come home to roost. What does that mean? How many of y'all have heard that saying? The chickens come home to
Wait, is
roost.
this the lesson one?
Yes, yes.
I don't know.
The chickens come home to roost. What does that mean?
The problems come back to the problems come back to you.
So do actions have
Or the
consequences?
problems
Wait, no.
Up to you.
Mikey, you're right. Do actions have consequences?
Yes.
Yes. So now we see the consequences of our previous actions. Okay. Our currency was called the Continentals during the war, right? But what happened because we were printing so much of them?
Inflation.
Inflation. And inflation does what to our money? What does it mean? What happens? What happens to the prices of things?
They go
They go up.
way.
The prices of things go up. They don't have to go way up. I mean, economists say a little bit of inflation is good, right? We want a little bit, but we don't want tons of inflation. Okay. And so, but because by 1781, we had printed so much of these continentals that they essentially became worthless. Like if you were to sell goods to someone and they were to try to pay you in continentals, you would be like, no, I want silver. Give me silver, right? Give me something that holds value, not this paper that doesn't hold any value.
How many
Okay.
silver dollars were in $1 today? Like Spanish silver dollars.
Oh, I'm not sure on that. The price of silver right now is around $25 an ounce. Okay, so a U.S. silver dollar, which has a face value of $1, is worth about $25, right? So don't spend it like $1, right? Okay, so we know that the prices cause things to go up, right? In addition, what do you think we had from fighting the American Revolution? What do you think the Continental Congress had to deal with after fighting the American Revolution? It starts with a D.
Destruction.
Nope.
Demolition.
Wars cost
Debt.
debt. Wars cost money.
I was close.
Wars cost money.
Not,
And hey, Mikey, wars cost money. And so because we just fought a war, we had a lot of debt. Okay. And so there were only two ways that we could pay for this debt, either printing money or selling Western lands. Okay.
you don't really want to sell this.
All right. So 1781 comes, Department of Finance came up with was created to help solve the inflation problem. It was led by this guy named Robert Morris. And he proposed a 5% tax on imported goods, right? To help solve some of this money issues, right? Now, what do we call that type of tax? A tax on imports is called
Tariff.
a tariff. Okay. Problem is, in having,
Colonies are like
no,
Earth states
Mikey.
like-
okay. Problem is, if we wanted to add a tax on imported goods,
It has to be unanimous.
every single state had to agree, right? All 13. 12 states approved the plan. One did not. So did it pass?
No.
Nope, did not pass. 1783, we have a second effort to put a tariff on ourselves to raise money. It also failed.
By how
Okay.
many?
I mean, just one is enough to fail, cause it to fall. Okay. So some of the problems that we had after the war with Great Britain, our merchants did not have access to the trading posts that we used to have access to under the Navigation Acts. So now we had to find new ones. That's bad for trade, right? If our merchants can't sell goods, is that good or bad for the economy? Bad, right? And we used to have a guaranteed place to sell them in the West Indies. And now the British were like, oh, you broke away? No, you don't have access. You don't have access to this, okay? So 1785, John Adams went to London to talk to the British. They refused to meet with him. Why do you think they did?
Because he betrayed them, kind of.
Well, a little. I mean, they're still,
Not the most popular.
yeah, not the most popular, right? And some other issues, the British we still have British troops in the Great Lakes area because we share the Great Lakes with Canada, right? So they're still there. We don't like that because we feel like that's us, like they're still in America, in the United States. And the other issue, remember, how were loyalists treated if you were loyal to Great Britain during the American Revolution, how do you think you were treated? Not very good. Your homes were ransacked, your property was taken, right? Things like that. Well, Americans had not paid back the British loyalists whose property had been taken. And this is one of the things that the British were like, hey, if you want us out of the Great Lakes, you need to pay back our property that you took. Okay. And so Congress is like, hey, states, you need to pay back these loyalists for all the property that was taken. How do you think the states reacted?
Didn't like it.
I think that's an exact quote, Tara. They looked in their powdered wig and goes, no, right? And was there anything Congress could do about it?
No.
No, right? If Congress passed a law that said states pay this money back, what would states be able to do?
Vote yes or no.
Still say no to it. It was kind of
Yeah.
pointless, okay? In addition, we had issues with Spain at the time because Spain is seeing Americans that are hungry for more land, moving west, pushing west, and they're worried that they're going to lose territory in North America. So they chose to close down what river to us?
Wait, repeat who?
Mississippi River.
They chose to close down the Mississippi River to us. That's a problem with trade because now people in the Ohio River Valley can't sell their goods down the Mississippi.
Nope.
Okay. And so in 1786, we reached a new trade agreement with Spain, but that trade agreement failed to open back up to Mississippi. So what do you think the economy is going to go into?
Ooh,
Get it.
depression.
A depression.
I was not that.
We're going to go into a depression.
So sad.
We have bad trade policy. We have inflation. Bad trade policy, inflation.
Wait,
Bad
The economy is
trade
not going to do
policy.
well.
the Great Depression
All right.
was in the
30s. Yeah. Okay. All right, guys. So we have finished. Now, the only thing I have for y'all, we have 6 minutes.
To talk about.
Not here. I have an exit ticket for y'all.
Including
Okay.
us.
Yes, everybody. Everybody.
It's on our computer.
It is. Let me go and drop it. Kobe. He was laying down. Okay, guys, your exit ticket has been dropped. Okay. So make sure that will be due. You should have it done today. Okay. It's just 10 questions. And so use your book, use the slides, and go through and you should be able to answer them. Okay, Chris, well, you're gonna have to use your phone or something, or find your charger, right? Because you still got to get some stuff done. All right, guys, I will see y'all. Well, in 4 minutes early, I will see y'all later.